Hello and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. Today we are doing Huevember week 2, which is going to be days 8 through 14, and our color palette is pretty much going to be orange, reddish orange, pink, and then purple. So for today's video, I wanted to do my antagonist for the story of Insomniacs, the Insomniacs trilogy, and that's going to be the Red Iron Assassins Guild. So we're doing 2 out of the 3 main assassins that we see, and that's going to be Luxe, who I am drawing now, and then her older sister Margo. So with Luxe, she's a nanomorph, but her abilities, they're kind of hard to draw like just on their own unless I'm drawing her with one of her victims, but I didn't want to give too much away about what her nanomorphism actually is. So I draw her with, there's a scene in the book, like way later in like part 3 of the first book, where she is dealing with one of the Oni Blackguard officers. And so pretty much every time I've drawn Luxe up to this point, it's been with this Oni mask, just because it's a very poignant scene for her, and it's been kind of a good way to show her abilities without giving away too much to anyone who hasn't. Well, I haven't posted that part of the story yet, so it would be a spoiler anyway. But when we get to that, you'll see what that's all about. So now I'm drawing her sister Margo, and Margo is actually also a nanomorph, which I do these little info panel on the side later, and I just kind of give her like the generic blade subclass. But her nanomorphism actually manifests in such a way that she can take her nanons. Sorry, nanons, by the way, are basically these tiny machines that get injected into your bloodstream, and they help regulate your internal systems as well as help Insomniacs connect to the outside technology that's out in the world. So anyway, now that we've got that out of the way, her nanons, she can manipulate them in such a way that she can push them through her skin and turn them into needles, blades, knives, like whatever she needs them to be. She can basically cover herself with like this huge porcupine needles just from her nanons. So there are several different classes of nanomorphs within this world, and these are just 2 of them. I don't know if I had discussed any of my other characters being nanomorphs up to this point, but let me see. Beast, Gwen, and Synth are also nanomorphs. So yeah, they were in the last picture. They are also nanomorphs. I'm not going to tell you what kind they are, so you can just read and find out. But yeah. So for this one, I wanted to do kind of like a cybernetic bounty board. Insomniacs isn't a cyberpunk type story, really. There are cyberpunk elements within the world, but because they're not integral to the plot, they don't really get mentioned a lot of the time. But I thought it would be fun with this color palette because it's so bright to do something like that. And it just really worked for the composition because I had played around with, honestly, I think, I want to say 4 or 5 different sketches before I came to this one. And I had recorded that, but it was just getting so frustrating. I was like, they don't want to see this. I'm just going to cut it out, and we're just going to start over with the sketch that we do end up with. So, which is why we started with the completed sketch and just moving on from that point. So what I'm doing here is I am, as you can see, I've labeled what I want each shade to represent. So going from light to dark, picking the color palette that I think best represents the character's elements. So the Oni masks, as I said, they're blackguards. They're just like these big, intimidating figures. They have this shiny black armor, and they wear these black and red Oni demon masks. I know that was kind of redundant for those of you who speak Japanese, I'm sorry. So, of course, the Oni mask is going to be quote-unquote black, which is going to be the darkest purple I have here. And then Luxe's hair is also black, but I wanted to make it more like a, kind of have it come off as more like a dusty charcoal black, so that it doesn't blend in where it touches the mask, and also just gives some more visual interest. I played around with the idea of making this like a fully fleshed out piece, but then after I do all of this work and zoom out, I don't like it. So I keep it flat, and then I just do all of my shading and my highlights as a flat layer. And also, after I started working on Margo, which is the other one, I realized that I made Luxe's skin tone way too dark. So Margo is like paper pale. She has like white skin, white hair, like actually like white skin and hair, and her eyes are an icy gray. So when I get her color palette situated, I have to go back in and fix Luxe's color palette. But right now I'm working on the light source. And what I'm doing for this is something that I usually do for my light sources. I take the color off just so that it's easier to see where I'm cutting the color in. And I've set the layer to multiply. Depending on what you're doing, multiply or overlay will kind of give you the same effect, but for this one, because the colors were so bright, overlay was not working, so I set it to multiply. And then I just select everything and color it in, and then I'm cutting the highlights back in with the eraser tool. It's really simple, it's really effective. And I do eventually end up getting rid of this too, just because it looks good here because the colors are flat, and then when I put the highlights in it still looks okay, but for some reason this ended up not working, but I left this part of the process in just so you guys could see what it looks like when I'm cutting in the shading and the highlights, or at least cutting in the shading for this part. And then I do have the highlights on a separate layer set to screen, so that not only does the color overlap whatever is underneath of it, but it actually heightens it and makes it look kind of fluorescent, I guess that's the right word for that. So here I'm shuffling between the two layers and adding in the highlights. So of course with my shadows I chose not the black purple, but somewhere in between, like that mulberry purple. And then for the highlights I'm using the highest orange. And I think I actually went with slightly over to the left on the color correction so that there was a little bit of white in it, just to make it, give it that extra bit of brightness. And I still have the other layers turned off when I'm doing this, just because working with a flat color or working with no color at all, it's a lot easier to see where things are going. So now I'm picking the colors for Margo, and again, as I said, that she's like very ghostly pale. So on my scale, I had orange as my highlight. I don't know why I didn't think to choose the middle grade pink first, because that actually is the lightest color light-wise out of all of these. So I end up going back in once I pick Margo's skin tone and going back in and correcting Luxe's skin tone as well. Which, you know what, now that I think about it, maybe this is why the lighting and shading didn't end up working. Because it worked when she was orange, but now that she's pink, I turn the layers back on and it looks really different. I'm just adding in details to the Oni masks. This is me trying to make it work, and I just have to turn it off I do keep some of the highlights because it looks really nice with the skin tone, but the shadows were too much for Luxe. It still worked for Margo because Margo has a much simpler color palette or color scheme than Luxe. I keep pausing because I'm trying to remember which sister I'm talking about. Oh gosh. Anyway, so then of course for this one I go again further left onto the color scale and pick a pink that has some white in it but is still basically just a lighter version of her skin tone. And now I'm adding, just to make it look even more like a bounty board, adding a frame around it. And because at this point I realized that pink is actually my lightest color that I'm working with here, I choose pink to highlight the outer edges because that makes it look not quite like a picture frame per se, but like a panel in a screen. And then I play around with some video filters. Well, it's called video degradation filters in GIMP to give it that extra cyberpunk feel. I take a pixel brush and set it to screen, and I choose the pink and the orange and just kind of dabble in some glitch. It's not the best glitch effect, like if I wanted to take more time and like actually go through and make it look like a nice glitchy effect, I definitely could have done that, and maybe I should have, but I really like the stylized, like it's over the top and unrealistic, so I actually really like the stylized way that it's in there. And now I'm just adding in the information about these characters, and we have come to the end of today's video. I know this one was a little bit shorter, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys next time, and have a weird day.